In the early 8th century, as the year 726 dawned over the glittering domes of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire stood at a crossroads that would define its cultural and religious identity for centuries to come. The period we're about to explore, spanning from 726 to 843 CE, marked one of the most turbulent chapters in Byzantine history, known as the iconoclastic controversy. The Byzantine Empire of this era was a vast and complex realm, stretching across 3 continents. At its heart stood Constantinople, the queen of cities, where the morning sun would catch the golden mosaics of the Hagia Sophia and set the Bosphorus Strait ablaze with light. The empire's territories encompassed the rocky coastlines of Asia Minor, the verdant hills of the Balkans, the sun-baked landscapes of southern Italy, and the ancient lands of Greece. Each region brought its own cultural flavors and challenges to this diverse empire. The political landscape of the time was fraught with external pressures and internal tensions. The rapid expansion of the Islamic Caliphate posed an existential threat to Byzantine territories, with Muslim armies pressing against the empire's eastern frontiers and launching raids deep into Asia Minor. These military pressures coincided with a period of intense debate about the empire's religious and cultural identity. The relationship between the imperial throne and religious authority had grown increasingly complex, with emperors seeking to assert control over church matters while religious leaders fought to maintain their autonomy. Within the empire's social fabric, clear divisions marked urban and rural life. In Constantinople and other major cities, an educated elite maintained classical learning and sophisticated theological discourse. These urbanites lived in a world of literary salons, theological debates, and imperial ceremonies. In contrast, the rural populations maintained more traditional practices, with a deep attachment to religious icons and local saints. This social divide would play a crucial role in the coming religious controversy. The physical environment of Byzantine cities, particularly Constantinople, was a feast for the senses. Massive churches dominated the skyline, their interiors glowing with golden mosaics that seemed to capture divine light itself. The air was frequently heavy with the sweet smoke of incense, wafting from religious processions that wound through narrow streets. Monasteries dotted both urban and rural landscapes, their scriptoria busy with monks carefully copying manuscripts and painting intricate miniatures. The economic life of the empire pulsed through bustling markets where merchants sold everything from exotic spices to precious icons. In specialized workshops, skilled artisans practiced the delicate art of icon painting, passing down techniques that had been refined over generations. These workshops were not merely places of commerce but centers of artistic and spiritual creation, where master craftsmen transformed wood and paint into windows to the divine. In the streets of Constantinople, one might encounter a fascinating mix of languages and cultures. Greek remained the empire's official language, but one could hear Latin, Armenian, Syriac, and various Slavic tongues in its marketplaces. Diplomatic missions from distant lands brought exotic goods and ideas, while traders from Venice and other Italian cities established permanent communities within the capital. This was a world where religion permeated every aspect of daily life. The rhythm of days was marked by church bells and liturgical celebrations. Public spaces were adorned with religious imagery, from small street corner shrines to massive church facades. Religious processions were regular occurrences, with golden icons carried through streets lined with devoted crowds, the air filled with the sound of ancient hymns. Yet this seemingly stable world was about to be shaken to its foundations. The empire faced not only external military threats but also internal questions about the very nature of religious practice and imperial authority. The stage was set for a controversy that would tear families apart, destroy countless artworks, and fundamentally reshape the relationship between political power and religious expression in the medieval world. The story of Byzantine iconoclasm is, at its heart, a drama of powerful personalities and conflicting beliefs. Let's meet the remarkable individuals who shaped this pivotal period in medieval history. Our story begins with Emperor Leo III, known to history as the Isaurian. Rising from humble origins in the eastern provinces, Leo seized the imperial throne in 717 and almost immediately proved his worth by successfully defending Constantinople against an Arab siege. But it was his religious policies that would define his legacy. In 726, Leo shocked the Byzantine world by ordering the removal of Christ's image from the Chulka Gate, the ceremonial entrance to the Great Palace. This act marked the beginning of the iconoclastic period. Leo believed that the empire's military setbacks were divine punishment for idol worship, and he was determined to purify the church. Though often portrayed as a simple soldier emperor, Leo was a sophisticated ruler who carefully calculated the political advantages of opposing icons. His son and successor, Constantine V, would prove even more radical in his iconoclastic beliefs. Ascending to the throne in 741, Constantine combined his father's military prowess with a fierce intellectual commitment to iconoclasm. He wasn't content merely to enforce the ban on images. He actively developed theological arguments against their use, writing treatises and convening the Council of Hieria in 754 to formally condemn religious imagery. Under his reign, the persecution of icon defenders reached its peak. Monks were publicly humiliated, monasteries were converted to military barracks, and precious artworks were systematically destroyed. Constantine's opponents nicknamed him Copronymus, named after dung. But he remained popular with the army and common people, leading successful campaigns against the empire's enemies while ruthlessly pursuing his religious policies. The first major turning point came with Empress Irene, one of the most fascinating figures in Byzantine history. Rising from an Athenian noble family to become empress through marriage, Irene seized power as regent for her young son in 780. In 787, she convened the Second Council of Nicaea, which reversed the iconoclastic policies and restored the veneration of images. Irene's motives combined genuine piety with shrewd political calculation. By supporting the icons, she gained the backing of the powerful monastic faction. Her reign was marked by both significant cultural achievements and dark personal tragedy, as she eventually had her own son blinded to maintain her grip on power. Though her reign ended in overthrow in 802, she had successfully restored icon veneration, at least temporarily. The final resolution of the controversy came under another remarkable woman, Empress Theodora. Serving as regent for her young son Michael III after 842, Theodora permanently restored icon veneration, an event still celebrated in the Orthodox Church as the triumph of orthodoxy. Like Irene before her, Theodora combined political acumen with religious conviction, but she managed the restoration with greater diplomatic skill, avoiding the violent reactions that had characterized earlier phases of the controversy. Among the most influential figures opposing iconoclasm was John of Damascus, perhaps the most brilliant theologian of his age. Writing from the safety of Muslim-controlled Syria, beyond the emperor's reach, John developed sophisticated theological arguments defending religious images. His 3 treatises on the divine images became the fundamental texts justifying icon veneration, arguing that to reject religious images was to deny the reality of Christ's incarnation. The monks of the Studaion monastery in Constantinople emerged as the strongest and most persistent opponents of iconoclasm. Under their charismatic abbot Theodore, they developed a network of resistance that preserved both theological arguments and artistic techniques for icon production. The Studites, as they were known, endured exile, imprisonment, and torture for their beliefs, but their resistance never wavered. Behind these prominent figures stood countless others whose lives were profoundly affected by the controversy. There were the artisans and craftsmen who had devoted their lives to creating sacred images, now forced to either abandon their calling or work in secret. Many fled to Italy or other regions beyond imperial control, taking their skills with them. Merchants who had built profitable trades in religious art saw their livelihoods destroyed overnight. Some adapted by shifting to secular art or other goods, while others established underground networks to continue supplying icons to the faithful. The human cost of the controversy was immense. Families were divided, with some members supporting the imperial policy while others risked everything to preserve their traditional practices. Monks were particularly targeted, as they were seen as the main defenders of icons. Many were forced into exile, while others faced torture or execution. Yet these persecutions often had the opposite effect from what was intended, creating martyrs whose stories strengthened the resolve of icon defenders. Through all these conflicts and persecutions, we see a complex web of motivations. Genuine religious conviction mingled with political ambition, cultural identity intertwined with economic interests, and personal faith challenged by imperial authority. The stories of these individuals, from emperors to humble craftsmen, remind us that great historical controversies are ultimately human dramas, shaped by the beliefs, fears, and aspirations of real people facing extraordinary circumstances. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy centered around fundamental questions that shook the empire to its core. At its heart lay the profound debate over the legitimacy of sacred images in Christianity, a conflict that would reshape religious practice and imperial politics for centuries to come. The primary conflict revolved around whether Christians could create and venerate religious images without committing idolatry. Iconoclasts argued that any depiction of Christ, Mary, or the saints violated the biblical commandment against graven images. They viewed the widespread use of icons as a dangerous descent into paganism. In contrast, iconodules, icon supporters, maintained that since God had taken human form in Christ, it was legitimate to depict him and his saints in art. They distinguished between worship, which was reserved for God alone, and veneration, which could be properly directed toward holy images. This theological dispute quickly evolved into a broader conflict between imperial authority and religious autonomy. The emperors who supported iconoclasm saw it as an opportunity to assert control over the church and monasteries, which had grown increasingly wealthy and influential. By attacking the practice of icon veneration, they could weaken the economic and social power of religious institutions while strengthening imperial authority. The monasteries, which were major centers of icon production and veneration, became particular targets of imperial persecution. The controversy also represented a clash between tradition and reform. Supporters of icons pointed to centuries of Christian artistic tradition, arguing that religious images had been used for instruction and devotion since the earliest days of the Church. Iconoclasts, however, presented themselves as reformers purifying Christianity of corrupting influences and returning it to its original simplicity. Several crucial subtexts enriched this central conflict. The interpretation of biblical passages about idolatry became a battleground for competing theological visions. Both sides cited Scripture extensively, with iconoclasts focusing on Old Testament prohibitions of images while iconodules emphasized New Testament teachings about Christ's incarnation. The relationship between secular and religious power emerged as another vital theme. The controversy forced Byzantines to grapple with fundamental questions about the emperor's role in religious matters. Could the emperor legitimately dictate religious doctrine and practice? Where did imperial authority end and church autonomy begin? The influence of neighboring cultures played a significant role in shaping the debate. The rise of Islam, with its strict prohibition of religious images, may have influenced some Byzantine emperors' iconoclastic policies. Jewish critiques of Christian image use also contributed to the intellectual climate. These external pressures forced Byzantines to reflect deeply on what made their religious practice distinctive. Art's role in expressing faith became a central point of contention. Iconodules argued that religious art served essential functions, educating the illiterate, inspiring devotion, and making divine mysteries more accessible to human understanding. They developed sophisticated theories about how images could serve as windows to heaven. Iconoclasts countered that true faith should transcend physical representations and focus solely on spiritual realities. The controversy had profound implications for understanding human capacity to represent the divine. Iconodules developed complex theological arguments about the nature of images, symbols, and representation that would influence Christian thought for centuries. These discussions raised fundamental questions about matter and spirit, visibility and invisibility, and how humans can know and approach God. Through these interwoven conflicts, the iconoclastic controversy forced Byzantines to address fundamental questions about their religious and political identity. The answers they eventually reached would shape not only their own society but the entire development of Eastern Christian tradition. The debate's complexity reminds us that religious controversies often encompass much more than theology alone, touching on issues of power, tradition, cultural identity, and human understanding of the divine. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy penetrated deeply into the fabric of everyday life, transforming social relationships and reshaping the physical environment in which people lived, worked, and worshipped. The systematic destruction of religious images in churches and monasteries created a profound visual and psychological impact on daily religious experience. Walking into a church during the height of iconoclasm, worshippers would have encountered whitewashed walls where vibrant sacred images once stood. Mosaics were covered with plaster, frescoes were scraped away, and precious icons were burned or broken. This dramatic transformation of sacred spaces affected how people experienced their faith on a daily basis. The familiar faces of saints that had watched over generations of worshippers vanished, replaced by abstract patterns or simple crosses. The persecution of monks and artists rippled through Byzantine society. Monasteries, which had been centers of community life, education, and artistic production, faced severe disruption. Some were converted into military barracks or secular buildings, while others were abandoned as their residents fled. Skilled artisans who had devoted their lives to icon production faced a harsh choice: adapt their skills to secular art, continue their sacred work in secret, or abandon their profession entirely. Many fled to Italy or other regions beyond imperial control, leading to a significant brain drain of artistic talent from the empire. The controversy created painful divisions within families. Historical records tell of children reporting their parents for hiding icons, and siblings denouncing each other to the authorities. Family meals could become tense occasions when members held opposing views on the legitimacy of religious images. These divisions were particularly acute in aristocratic families, where some members might hold official positions requiring them to enforce iconoclastic policies while others remained devoted to traditional practices. The transformation of sacred spaces extended beyond churches and monasteries to public areas. Street corner shrines, a common feature of Byzantine urban life, were demolished or modified. Public processions, which had traditionally featured the display of icons, were either discontinued or dramatically altered. Even private homes were affected, as families had to decide whether to risk keeping religious images or remove them to avoid persecution. The controversy spurred the development of alternative artistic expressions. Unable to create traditional religious images, artists turned to secular subjects or developed highly stylized decorative patterns that could be interpreted as either secular or religious. Abstract designs, geometric patterns, and nature motifs became more prominent in church decoration. Some artists developed clever ways to incorporate religious symbolism into apparently secular works, creating a kind of underground artistic language understood by the faithful. The economic impact was substantial. The icon trade had been a significant industry, supporting not only artists but also merchants, suppliers of materials, and transporters. Its disruption forced many to seek alternative livelihoods. Some workshops shifted to producing secular luxury goods, while others maintained clandestine icon production for wealthy patrons who were willing to risk possessing forbidden images. Education and intellectual life also changed. Monasteries had been centers of learning and manuscript production. Their disruption affected the transmission of knowledge and cultural traditions. Some forms of religious literature declined, while new genres emerged focusing on theological arguments for and against images. The controversy stimulated intense intellectual debate about the nature of art, representation, and religious expression. The social hierarchy underwent subtle but significant changes. Families that had traditionally gained prestige through religious patronage and icon collection had to find new ways to display their status. New social networks emerged around both iconoclastic and iconodual positions, creating alternative paths to influence and power. Urban life adapted to these changes in various ways. Markets that had once openly sold religious images went underground or transformed into outlets for secular goods. Secret workshops continued producing icons in hidden locations, while complex networks developed to distribute these forbidden objects to the faithful. Communities developed subtle signals and codes to identify fellow believers and safe spaces for traditional worship. The controversy also affected gender roles and relationships. Women often played crucial roles in preserving religious traditions and icons within the household, sometimes at great personal risk. The conflict created opportunities for some women to assert religious and cultural leadership, particularly in the domestic sphere where official oversight was more difficult to maintain. These changes in daily life and social structure left lasting marks on Byzantine society. Even after the restoration of icons, some of the alternative artistic and cultural practices that developed during iconoclasm continued to influence Byzantine civilization. The experience of living through such a profound conflict changed how people thought about religious expression, social relationships, and the intersection of public and private life in ways that would persist long after the controversy itself had ended. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy unfolded through a series of dramatic events that fundamentally altered the empire's religious and political landscape. Each major turning point brought new tensions and transformations that would shape Byzantine society for centuries to come. The first seismic shift occurred in 726 CE when Emperor Leo III issued his infamous edict against religious images. The moment was marked by a dramatic public demonstration of imperial power, the removal and destruction of the cherished icon of Christ from the Chulka Gate, the ceremonial entrance to the Great Palace. This act sparked immediate resistance, including a riot where an imperial official attempting to destroy the image was killed by a group of women. The event set the pattern for the controversy. Imperial decree met with popular resistance, violence followed by repression. Leo's edict was only the beginning. Over the next decades, the iconoclastic movement gained momentum, culminating in the Council of Hieria in 754 under Constantine V. This council represented the first systematic attempt to provide theological justification for iconoclasm. Unlike previous church councils, no patriarchs from the other major Christian sees attended, highlighting the growing isolation of Constantinople from the wider Christian world. The council's declarations were far-reaching. It condemned the making of religious images as heretical and ordered the destruction of existing icons. The decisions at Hieria gave legal and theological backing to intensified persecution of icon supporters. The first major reversal came with the Second Council of Nicaea in 787, convened by Empress Irene. This council systematically refuted the arguments of Hieria and established the Orthodox doctrine regarding images that remains influential in Christian churches today. The council drew crucial distinctions between worship, reserved for God alone, and veneration, which could be properly offered to images, and between the image itself and what it represented. The restoration of icons was accompanied by elaborate ceremonies and processions, marking what many thought would be the end of the controversy. However, the victory of the iconodules proved temporary. In 815, Emperor Leo V renewed the iconoclastic policy, beginning what historians call the Second Iconoclastic Period. This phase was marked by more sophisticated theological arguments on both sides and somewhat less violent persecution, though opposition to icons remained official imperial policy. The final and decisive turning point came in 843 with the triumph of Orthodoxy under Empress Theodora. Acting as regent for her young son Michael III, Theodora permanently restored the veneration of icons. The event, still celebrated annually in Orthodox churches, was marked by a solemn procession restoring icons to Hagia Sophia. This time, the restoration proved permanent, though its implementation was handled with diplomatic skill to avoid provoking violent reaction from remaining iconoclasts. The consequences of these events were far-reaching and multifaceted. The destruction of art during the iconoclastic periods resulted in the loss of countless masterpieces from early Christian and early Byzantine art. Nearly all pre-iconoclastic icons were destroyed, leaving modern historians with precious few examples of early Byzantine religious art. The gaps in artistic tradition forced artists to develop new styles and techniques during the post-iconoclastic period, leading to what some scholars call the Byzantine Renaissance. The controversy paradoxically strengthened the monastic movement it had tried to suppress. Monasteries emerged from the conflict with enhanced prestige due to their role in preserving Orthodox tradition and resisting imperial pressure. The Studite monastery in Constantinople, in particular, gained enormous influence, and its reformed monastic rule became a model throughout the Orthodox world. The relationship between church and state underwent significant redefinition. While the emperor retained considerable influence over church affairs, the failure of imperially imposed iconoclasm established clear limits to imperial authority in doctrinal matters. The church emerged with a stronger sense of its autonomous spiritual authority, though still closely linked to imperial power. The controversy also had lasting effects on Byzantine diplomatic relations. The rift with Rome, which had steadfastly opposed iconoclasm, contributed to the growing estrangement between Eastern and Western Christianity. Meanwhile, Byzantine relations with the Islamic world, where religious images were prohibited, took on new complexity. Cultural changes prompted by the controversy persisted long after its resolution. New forms of religious art developed during the iconoclastic period, particularly non-figurative decorative styles, continued to influence Byzantine aesthetics. The theological arguments developed during the controversy enriched Christian thought about art, symbolism, and the relationship between spiritual and material reality. The experience of living through such a profound conflict left lasting marks on Byzantine society. The memory of iconoclasm influenced how later Byzantines thought about orthodoxy, authority, and tradition. The annual celebration of the triumph of orthodoxy became not just a commemoration of the end of iconoclasm, but a general celebration of Orthodox doctrine triumphing over all heresies. These pivotal events and their consequences demonstrate how theological controversies can reshape not only religious practice but also political structures, artistic expression, and social relationships. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy stands as a testament to the profound interconnection between religious beliefs and broader cultural and political life in medieval society. The iconoclastic controversy generated an extraordinary flourishing of theological thought and cultural expression, producing sophisticated arguments and artistic innovations that would influence Byzantine civilization for centuries to come. The theological debate surrounding icons reached unprecedented levels of intellectual sophistication. Iconoclasts developed complex arguments against religious images, drawing heavily on Old Testament prohibitions against idolatry. They argued that any attempt to depict Christ in material form necessarily separated his human and divine natures, constituting a theological error. Additionally, they contended that true spiritual worship should transcend material representations, viewing the popular attachment to icons as a form of dangerous materialism that distracted from pure spiritual devotion. In response, defenders of icons crafted equally sophisticated theological counterarguments. They emphasized the reality of Christ's incarnation. Since God had taken physical form in Christ, they argued, it was entirely appropriate to represent him in physical images. John of Damascus, a key intellectual figure in the controversy, developed the influential concept of images as windows to heaven, arguing that icons served as channels of divine grace rather than objects of worship in themselves. The iconodules also stressed the pedagogical value of images, maintaining that visual representations made religious truths accessible to the illiterate and helped focus devotional practice. These debates led to the development of a comprehensive theology of images that remains influential in Eastern Orthodox thought. Theologians carefully distinguished between different types of images and various forms of reverence, developing subtle analyses of how images function in religious practice. They explored questions about the nature of representation itself. How can the divine be represented in material form? What is the relationship between an image and its prototype? These philosophical investigations produced insights that went far beyond the immediate controversy. The impact on Byzantine art and architecture was profound and long-lasting. During the iconoclastic period, church decoration shifted toward non-figurative designs. Artists developed elaborate patterns of crosses, vegetation, and geometric designs that complied with iconoclastic restrictions while maintaining aesthetic sophistication. Some of these decorative innovations survived even after the restoration of icons, enriching the Byzantine artistic vocabulary. When icon production resumed after the controversy, it did so with new theoretical underpinnings and artistic approaches. Post-iconoclastic Byzantine art showed greater attention to formal rules and theological correctness. Artists developed standardized ways of depicting sacred figures and scenes, creating what we now recognize as the classic Byzantine style. The experience of iconoclasm led to a more self-conscious and theoretically grounded approach to religious art. The controversy also stimulated an outpouring of literary production. Both sides produced theological treatises, polemical works, and hagiographies supporting their positions. This literary activity helped develop Byzantine intellectual discourse, introducing new forms of argument and rhetorical strategies. The need to defend or attack icons pushed writers to explore fundamental questions about the nature of art, worship, and human understanding of the divine. Underground artistic production during the iconoclastic period led to interesting developments. Secret workshops maintained traditional techniques while developing methods to conceal their work. Some artists created works with multiple layers of meaning, appearing innocent to iconoclastic authorities while conveying religious significance to the initiated. These practices influenced later Byzantine approaches to artistic symbolism and meaning. The controversy also affected intellectual life in monasteries, traditionally centers of learning and artistic production. While many monasteries suffered during iconoclastic persecution, some became centers of resistance, preserving both artistic techniques and theological arguments supporting icons. The Studite monastery in Constantinople, in particular, emerged as a major intellectual center, developing influential arguments for icon veneration. Cultural exchange played a significant role in the intellectual debate. Byzantine theologians engaged with Jewish and Muslim critiques of Christian image use, leading to more sophisticated defenses of Christian artistic practices. The controversy also influenced Byzantine diplomatic and cultural relations with the Latin West, where religious images remained accepted. The development of liturgical practices was another significant cultural outcome. The restoration of icons was accompanied by new rituals and ceremonies celebrating their role in worship. The annual Feast of Orthodoxy, commemorating the final restoration of icons, added a new dimension to Byzantine liturgical life and continues to be celebrated in Orthodox churches today. The controversy's intellectual legacy extended far beyond its immediate context. The sophisticated theories about images and representation developed during this period influenced medieval and modern thinking about art and its relationship to religion. The Byzantine exploration of how material objects can mediate spiritual realities contributed important insights to broader philosophical and theological discussions. The cultural and intellectual ferment of the iconoclastic period demonstrated the remarkable resilience and creativity of Byzantine civilization. Even in the midst of severe religious and political conflict, Byzantine thinkers and artists continued to produce works of lasting significance. The theoretical frameworks and artistic innovations developed during this time helped shape not only Byzantine culture but also the broader development of Christian art and thought. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy did not occur in isolation but was deeply influenced by and in turn influenced the broader medieval world. The complex web of international relations, religious dialogues, and cultural exchanges played a crucial role in shaping the conflict and its resolution. The rise of Islam significantly influenced Byzantine attitudes toward religious images. The remarkable military success of Muslim armies, who prohibited religious images, led some Byzantine emperors to question whether their empire's use of icons had weakened it spiritually. Islamic criticisms of Christian image veneration as idolatrous resonated with iconoclastic arguments. Some historians suggest that Leo III's iconoclastic policies were partly inspired by his desire to remove what Muslims saw as a major obstacle to potential converts from Christianity to Islam. However, the relationship between Islamic prohibition of images and Byzantine iconoclasm was complex. While iconoclasts may have been influenced by Muslim arguments, they developed their own distinctive theological justifications based on Christian scripture and tradition. Ironically, the controversy ultimately led Byzantium to define its religious identity more sharply in contrast to Islam, as the final triumph of icon veneration became a marker of distinctive Christian practice. The papacy's reaction to iconoclasm proved crucial in shaping East-West relations. Rome consistently opposed iconoclasm, with several popes strongly condemning the practice and offering refuge to iconodule monks fleeing persecution. Pope Gregory II's letters to Leo III provided sophisticated theological defenses of images that would influence later arguments. The papal opposition to iconoclasm contributed to the growing estrangement between Constantinople and Rome, weakening the bonds between Eastern and Western Christianity. The controversy significantly impacted Byzantine diplomatic relations with Western European kingdoms. The Frankish Empire under Charlemagne took a middle position, accepting religious images for educational purposes while rejecting their veneration. This stance, articulated in the Caroline books, revealed the growing theological sophistication of the Frankish Church and its increasing independence from both Rome and Constantinople. Trade routes and artistic exchange networks underwent significant transformation during this period. Traditional centers of icon production, particularly in Constantinople and other major Byzantine cities, were disrupted. This led to the development of new artistic centers in regions beyond imperial control, especially in Italy and areas under Muslim rule where Christian communities maintained their traditional practices. The controversy affected Byzantine cultural influence in neighboring regions in complex ways. Some areas, particularly in the Balkans and southern Italy, remained committed to icon veneration despite imperial policy, strengthening their ties with Rome. Others, especially frontier regions facing Muslim territories, experienced similar debates about the role of religious images in Christian practice. International trade in religious art was profoundly disrupted. The lucrative trade in icons, which had been a significant part of Byzantine economic activity, was forced underground or redirected to new centers. Workshops in Rome, Venice, and other Italian cities began producing icons to meet continuing demand, leading to the development of distinctive regional styles. The controversy also influenced Byzantine relations with Armenia and Georgia, where local churches maintained their own traditions regarding religious art. These churches generally supported icon veneration, though with some distinctive theological emphases, and their resistance to iconoclasm helped preserve artistic traditions that would influence the post-iconoclastic revival. Jewish communities within and beyond the empire played an interesting role in the debate. While iconoclasts sometimes cited Jewish criticism of Christian images, iconodules developed new arguments defending Christian artistic practices against both Jewish and Muslim critiques. These interactions contributed to more sophisticated theoretical understandings of the role of art in religious practice. The movement of artists and intellectuals during the controversy had lasting effects on cultural exchange. Many skilled artisans fled to Italy, contributing to the preservation and development of religious art there. Some found refuge in Muslim territories, where Christian communities maintained their artistic traditions despite official disapproval. This diaspora of Byzantine artists influenced artistic developments across the Mediterranean world. Commercial networks adapted to the new situation. Smuggling networks developed to transport forbidden religious images, while legitimate trade shifted to focus on secular luxury goods. Some merchants specialized in materials that could be used for both religious and secular art, maintaining supply chains that would prove crucial for the eventual revival of icon production. The controversy affected diplomatic protocol and ceremonial practices. The presence or absence of icons in diplomatic settings became politically significant. Byzantine embassies to other courts had to navigate complex issues around the display of religious images, while foreign envoys to Constantinople had to adapt to changing imperial policies. These international dimensions of the controversy reveal how theological disputes could reshape diplomatic relations, trade networks, and cultural exchange across the medieval world. The resolution of the controversy not only defined Byzantine religious practice but also influenced how the empire interacted with its neighbors and trading partners. The long-term impact of these external interactions was significant. The Byzantine Empire emerged from the controversy with a more clearly defined religious identity, distinctive from both Islam and Western Christianity. The experience of defending religious images against various critiques led to more sophisticated theological and artistic traditions that would influence Christian art and thought for centuries to come. The network of artistic and intellectual exchange that developed during this period, though born of crisis, enriched the cultural life of the medieval Mediterranean world. The movement of artists, ideas, and techniques across political and religious boundaries contributed to the development of new artistic styles and theological perspectives that transcended the immediate controversy. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy left an indelible mark on religious thought, artistic expression, and political theory that continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about the relationship between art, religion, and power. The Byzantine iconoclastic controversy sparked a profound debate about the role of images in spirituality, giving rise to a complex theological foundation that continues to shape the understanding of sacred art to this day. During the Second Council of Nicaea, careful distinctions were drawn between veneration and worship, and between images and their prototypes. These distinctions laid a framework that still influences Orthodox and Catholic approaches to religious art, helping to establish a clear doctrine on the appropriate use of religious images. This era also provided guidelines for both creating and venerating sacred art, deepening the understanding of the relationship between material and spiritual reality, and defining a framework that distinguished proper reverence from idolatry. The controversy left a lasting impact on the artistic and cultural heritage of Christianity. It played a defining role in shaping Christian art, leading to the establishment of strict iconographic canons and the development of a sophisticated symbolic language within religious art. This period saw theological meaning seamlessly integrated with artistic expression, inspiring new styles that carefully balanced representational accuracy with spiritual significance. Following the iconoclastic controversy, the Byzantine classical style emerged, characterized by standardized portrayals of sacred figures, the use of reverse perspective, a seamless integration of text and image, and a focus on spiritual rather than naturalistic representation. On a political and institutional level, the controversy helped define the boundaries between secular and religious authority, solidifying limits on imperial intervention in doctrinal matters and strengthening the Church's ability to resist state control. This era set lasting precedents for addressing church-state conflicts, influencing the development of political theories on religious freedom and asserting the Church's autonomy in spiritual matters. The lessons of the iconoclastic controversy extend to contemporary debates on religious representation. Issues raised during this period resonate in today's discussions about religious symbols in public spaces, the role of religious art in secular contexts, and the preservation of religious identity within public and governmental settings. Today, these themes are reflected in the protection of religious art during conflicts, the preservation of sacred sites, and the careful balance between cultural heritage and religious practice. In the digital age, these debates have evolved further, encompassing virtual religious experiences, the digital reproduction of sacred images, and the role of technology in modern religious practice. The controversy also underscores enduring questions about religious freedom and artistic expression. Modern societies continue to grapple with balancing artistic freedom with religious sensitivity, exploring the boundaries of creative interpretation of religious themes and reconciling innovation with tradition. Meanwhile, religious liberty faces ongoing challenges, from the protection of religious symbols and practices to accommodating diverse views on religious expression and the intersection of religious freedom with cultural identity. In contemporary religious experience, the insights from this controversy remain relevant for understanding the educational and spiritual role of art in faith traditions. Visual media is a powerful tool for communicating complex spiritual concepts, integrating both traditional and modern forms to enhance religious education. The impact of visual elements on worship, the role of art in meditation and prayer, and the delicate balance between aesthetic appeal and spiritual depth are all legacies of the theological discourse shaped by the iconoclastic controversy. Finally, the controversy echoes in modern state-religion relations, reflecting the ongoing tension over government involvement in religious matters. Issues of state funding for religious art, the preservation of religious heritage, and the regulation of religious expression highlight the delicate boundaries between secular and religious interests. These debates bring us back to the essential insights of the Byzantine iconoclastic controversy, which continue to offer valuable perspectives on the role of visual representation in religion, the balance between secular and spiritual authority, the protection of religious and cultural heritage, and the relationship between artistic freedom and religious sensitivity. The controversy's legacy continues to inform modern approaches to these complex issues, demonstrating the enduring relevance of historical religious and cultural debates to contemporary society. Rather than providing definitive answers, the controversy's history offers frameworks for understanding and addressing similar challenges in our own time, while reminding us of the complexity and importance of balancing different aspects of religious, artistic, and political life. This fascinating story of war of images shows us how debates about art and religion can transform an entire society. What are your thoughts on how these historical debates relate to contemporary issues regarding religious art and expression? How do you see the role of religious imagery evolving in our increasingly digital and diverse world? Leave your comment below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories from the Middle Ages.